Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about digital noise reduction and sharpening. So on your current assignment you've been dealing with this basic panel here. We're actually going to skip past tone curve, the color and split toning, and we're going to go down here to detail, and this is where today's video is going to focus. I picked an image from years ago that I shot up in the near Lone Pine, California, in this abandoned house on the side of the 395, and it presented some interesting challenges. The first thing was the range of brightness, the bright tones versus how dark the shadows were. It was really more than the camera could handle, and I didn't have a tripod with me either, so I took a couple exposures of this just to be able to kind of compare against each other. So I have one here where I exposed for the highlights outside the window, and I have another version here where I exposed for inside. So in the interior you can see you've got this great wood paneling that's still in pretty good shape. There's nice really fine grain in it. This one here you can see we're going to have problems outside the window. And here we've got good detail outside the window, but we're not really sure what we've got yet in these shadows here. So as a way to show what we can do with noise reduction and sharpening, we're going to deal with this image. We're going to give it a quick retouch and then see what might be lurking in these shadows here. So really quick, let's go back up to the basic panel, and I'm going to start opening up the shadows. I can see I've got some of this good detail back here. Let's just go ahead and open that up all the way. We'll bring up the blacks just a little bit, and we're going to take the highlights, bring them down a touch, and this brings it a lot closer to what you actually would have seen with your eye. Notice I didn't have to really mess with the exposure adjustment here. We just took some targeted changes to the tones of the highlights, shadows, and blacks here, but the whites we've left alone, and that's pretty good so far. Let's go back down to detail, and on my screen I can see in here I suspect there's going to be some issues with noise. So let's go. We go here, there's a couple of ways we can do this. We can zoom. I can see it here. We can also use this tool. We click on it and you can see the preview area moves with the cursor. But I really want to get down in here where I can see kind of a screen door pattern and some blotchiness. So let's go right here. Click there to leave it there. You want to have this zoomed in at least 1:1 to be able to see the noise. You can go further. This gives me a really good view of it. And first let's deal with the noise. One of the first things that I can see here is I can see some mostly red, a little bit of there's a little bit of green and blue splotchiness in there too, but definitely some on the red and green side. So let's start with the color slider. Take that up, and we're just going to take it until the color noise disappears. Let's see how far we have to go. So at 100 it's basically gone, but let's see right where the edge of that is. We don't want to apply any more than we need. Once the color noise is gone, that's all we need. So let's say right around there at this end we can see a lot, and right about here it's pretty well cleaned up. Underneath the color slider we have the detail slider. This is when, let's say we adjusted this all the way, trying to get rid of the color noise, and if it seemed like it was affecting our edges and these were too soft, we could try to bring back some detail, try to recover some. Sometimes that'll bring back some of your color noise. So I can see there's some little spots here and there that look like they've come back. If we go this direction, then we lose a little detail. So it defaults here in the middle. But I think right around here was a pretty good compromise. Next, some of the graininess here. It's not so much a color as just a grain issue. You can see there's sort of a finer grain here, but when we get here, it gets more pronounced and it has this, you can detect kind of a pattern in here. That we'll deal with luminance noise reduction. So let's take the slider. If you really want to see how it affects it, just push it all the way to its extreme. We can see there's no more grain in here. The only problem is there's also really almost no sharp detail left. The trouble with noise reduction when you have to resort to it is that you're always looking at a compromise of some sort. You can have a clean image that looks relatively noise free, or you can have lots of sharp detail, but it's hard to have clean and sharp when you're shooting dark shadows or shooting at low ISO. So we're really just looking for the best compromise. We're going to try to get rid of as much noise, color noise and luminance noise as possible, and keep as much fine detail as we can, but it won't be ideal necessarily. We're going to try to find the best compromise. One of the things that I'm looking at is I want to keep this fine detail in the wood. If we lose the wood grain in our attempts to get rid of the noise, then I feel like we've sacrificed something that I personally liked about the image. So let's see how far we can go with this before we start to lose some of that. You can see it's getting smoother, but there's still this ugly pattern in here. And this is going to be a tough one. I can see it's getting smoother and smoother, so we're at the point where this is softer than I would really like it. And yet we can still see some of that noise in here. So that tells me this is an image where we're just going to have to find a way to live with some of the noise, and maybe we can find a way to mask some of it. We probably won't be able to get rid of all of it. So I'm going to start to bring this back down, keeping an eye on some of this detail in here, especially the wood grain, as I said. Let's go back here into the ceiling as well, these panels. Let's see, right about here. Bring the noise reduction all the way down so we can see we've got grain, but the texture goes with it as we try to reduce the noise and the grain. So we really won't be able to use very much of this if we want to have any of the texture of the wood. It's just too close in size to the size of the grain and the noise. So I think right about here is probably as much as we can allow. The detail slider here works similarly. Let's say we overcompensated here. We reduced a lot of noise, but now we have this soft, smeary looking thing. We could bring back some detail like this, but now again we have some kind of blotchiness here. A better way to get our detail back here is to just not use so much of this and bring this back down here, and we'll just look to see where do we start to lose some of our wood grain. So I'll just keep walking it back, and I think that might be as much as we can get away with. So I'll look around the image and see. You can see we have some chromatic aberration here that we have other tools in Lightroom to take care of that. I'll be showing you that in a later video. And I can see we've still got noise here, but we really can't do very much about it at this point. We can clean it up a little bit, but unfortunately our detail here is going to go with it if we take too much out. As we step back, the image doesn't look so bad. It's just down here in these areas. If we were to print this image, a large print, this would be pretty apparent. One solution would be to make this a black and white image. The grain won't be as noticeable. You'll still see it, but it won't look as obvious as it would in color. That's one way, but you can't always resort to that. Sometimes you have an image that needs to remain in color and you can't convert it to black and white, so you reduce the noise the best you can. One last kind of you could say it's a trick or just another technique, but one last thing that you could do to it to try to minimize this and make it look less like noise would be to add some grain. So as you can see, as I turn this up, it really gets masked because there's this thick layer of grain on top of it. So we can add, this is the amount of grain. We can change the size of the grain, make it really big. It starts to look a little sloppy. I think it's probably better to go with something that's a bit finer. You can see now there's some of that remaining color noise here. We can change, do we want to make this something that's very rough or a smoother grain? So we've kind of dealt with the grain structure. Now, obviously, I think you need to back it way off. So you can see it kind of mixes in with this a little bit. There, I can still see the pattern there, but it's not as bad because we have some of this grain throughout the image. That's one way you can deal with it. So we've had a chance to look at ways you can approach noise reduction in this particularly noisy example here. The things that you need to keep in mind when dealing with noise are the size of the detail that's important to you, and how close is it to the size of the noise that you're trying to reduce. So if your texture is pretty large and the details you're interested in are large, then you have some latitude to reduce noise before you start to lose detail. If you have fine detail like we had in this image, then you're really looking at what's the best compromise, what's the most noise we can get rid of before we lose detail, and then with the noise that's remaining, is it something we can live with? Is there a way to minimize it or mask it? Perhaps some combination of those. If you're asking yourself, how do I avoid this problem in the first place? Really the best way is to shoot at the lowest ISO that you can, and then in the future going forward, the newer cameras seem to be getting better and better when it comes to low noise performance. This was shot several years ago with, I believe, a Canon 50D or perhaps a 5D Mark II, something along those lines. It had, for its time, it had okay low noise performance, but newer cameras have just gotten better and better. So you have a lot more room to shoot at higher and higher ISOs before you run into these noise problems like this. So that's the good news, is that cameras are getting better in this area. But it still helps to know the best way to approach noise regardless of what camera you're shooting with. So that wraps up our look at noise reduction today. If you have any questions about it, definitely refer to our textbook. Scott Kelby does a great job of explaining noise reduction, and he has a couple of different examples of how to do it. If you've got any further questions, feel free to email me or post your question in the tech support forum online. See you next time.